Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, sh'hakol nihiyeh b'divaro. Hello, my pals. Who's in the house? Coming to you from the East Coast. I'm traveling. I'm on the road with my daughter. We're visiting colleges. We've had a wonderful day in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And now I'm coming to you from Milton, Massachusetts. Who's here? Kim Varner says, Amen. She caught the bracha, the blessing that we just made. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, by whose word everything comes into being. Got a beautiful AT Daily for you today. Let's signal to Facebook that we're doing something of value here so more people get a chance to see it. Hit the love, hit the like, tell me where you're tuning in from, comment, show Facebook this is a conversation starter. Carolyn, in from Indiana. Bridget, Dallas, Texas. Patricia Lane, from the home of the Kansas City Chiefs. Woohoo! Oh my gosh. I know it's Sunday. I've been completely out of touch. I have no idea who won this weekend. Who's still in the playoffs? I have no idea. Kim Varner says she's in Philly. Philly's in the house. Who else is in the house? Do we have any other continents? Any other countries? Let me know. We all want to know. The more you comment, the more we're telling Facebook this is something valuable and stuff is going on. Marcus Tempe from Sublimity, Oregon. What a cool name. There's a town called Sublimity? I love that. Amjad Ali from Pakistan. Fantastic. We love that Pakistan is in the house. Paul Papuzinski back in Louisiana. What's up, Paul? How's everybody doing? Sandy Carlo, Kansas City, and we are going to Miami. Woo! Miami, are you telling me you're going to the Super Bowl? How cool is that? Awesome. Bridget says shared. Thank you, Bridget. Miriam Jacob in the house. All right, this is fantastic. Hello, my dear friends. We are still in chapter 2 of the first volume of the Talmud. We're in Berachos, blessings. And now we are on Daf 16, Tet Zion. We don't, it's not Yud Vav, the way I would normally think 10 and 6, because Yud and Vav are two letters that are within the name of God. And so in Hebrew numbering, we switch and we say 9 and 7, Tet Zion. And that's how we get to Daf Tet Zion equals page 16. Nina's in the house. Oh, look at this. Luxembourg is in the house. How cool is that? Isn't Luxembourg like one of the cool, I think it's one of the richest countries in the world, right? Frederick J. Marciello, New York City, in the house. All right, let's get into it. Daf 16. So we have a beautiful story here. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi were tying a wedding canopy together for the wedding of Rabbi Elazar. Okay. Now, what's cool about this is there's a tradition. This is one of the things I love about the Koran Talmud. It has these kind of background notes. And in ancient Israel, when a baby boy was born, they would plant a cedar tree. If a baby girl was born, they would plant an acacia tree. And many years later, when the young person was getting married, right, so the sapling had grown into a tree, and then they would use branches from that tree to create the chuppah, the wedding canopy. Isn't that beautiful? Planted when they're born and harvest the branches from it to make the chuppah when they're getting married. And apparently the chuppah back then, now a chuppah is basically a tallis, a prayer shawl, sort of held on 4 poles, and held over the wedding couple. Sometimes it's not even a tallis, it's just a nice cloth. In fact, we used ours. We had a chuppah made for our wedding, Nina and I, and then we draped it over our 4-poster bed. So that it's like we're always sleeping under our chuppah, which is a nice thing. But back then, the chuppah was a very elaborate canopy that was almost like a room where the couple could be secluded during the wedding. Enough said about that. So while they were constructing this quite elaborate chuppah for Rabbi Elazar, they were doing it for him, so he couldn't participate in making his own canopy. He had a little free time. And he said, okay, so while you guys are working on that, I see that Rabbi Yochanan is in town and he's teaching, so a very famous sage of the previous generation, and he's teaching in the house of study. I'm going to go learn something, and then I'll bring back to you guys what I learned. So that's why this story is here. What he learned about is one of these rules of how to recite the Shema with what kind of intentionality, how to handle interruptions, etc. That's what we've been learning about. And so what Rabbi Elazar learned from Rabbi Yochanan in the study hall that day was that if you're reciting the Shema and you realize that you spaced, right, because you do this every day, twice a day, sometimes more than twice a day, and it just becomes by rote, and sometimes you kind of space out and you realize that you made a mistake. So how should you handle that you made a mistake somewhere in it? Do you just go back to the beginning and do the whole thing over again? Answer, when you realize you made a mistake, you go back to the previous paragraph break from where you were. And then Rabbi Yochanan clarified that if you reached the part in the second paragraph where you're saying that you should keep all these laws in order to lengthen your days in the land. Right? Remember the second paragraph of the Shema, and if you'll heed all my commandments and love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your resources, then I will send the rain in its proper time, the early rain and the late rain. You'll gather in your grain, your wine, and your oil, and I will provide grass in the field for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. But if you turn away, if your heart is deceived, if you serve other gods, the Lord's anger will blaze at you, and he will restrain the rain, and there will be no rain. The land will dry up, and you'll be forced out of the land that I gave to your fathers. So keep these words in your heart, bind them as a sign upon your hand, let them be a symbol before your eyes, that your days, and inscribe on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates, that your days and the days of your children may be lengthened in the good land that I gave to your ancestors for as long as the days of heaven and earth. So Rabbi Yochanan says, if you reach that last part, so that your days may be lengthened on the land that I gave to your fathers, so then you should assume that you got it right up until then, and you can sort of finish that paragraph, right? And what he was commenting on is memory. Like if we're sort of flowing down that channel, and then we think we made a mistake, but we got that far, then it's unlikely that we made a mistake. It's more like we're just spacing out, and because you said it, but you didn't have the intention, but you said it because you say it every day, so then you're covered, is what he was saying. And so Rabbi Elazar brought it back, what he just learned from Rabbi Yochanan, and the other teaching about going back to the previous paragraph break if you think you made a mistake, and the exception to that, etc. So he comes back and he tells Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi what he learned in the house of study that day. And these guys have been working all day, right, putting his elaborate wedding canopy together for him. And they say to him, if we had only come here to learn what you just taught us, dayenu, it would have been sufficient for us. They were so happy to get that teaching. So that was the wedding canopy story as a way to get into this subject of what to do if you space out while you're praying. There. And so that the halacha, the actual law, and we're going to talk about this in a moment. Let me just get back and make sure that I read it to you correctly. Right? So if you make a mistake like they made, if one recited the Shema and made a mistake and does not know where he made a mistake, one who erred in the recitation of the Shema but does not know where he erred returns to the beginning of the paragraph. If he is uncertain which paragraph he was reciting, he returns to the beginning of the first paragraph. If he was reciting the verse, and you shall write them, and is uncertain whether it is that verse in the first paragraph or the one in the second paragraph that he's reciting, he returns to the first. If he began reciting the verse in order to lengthen your days at the end of the second paragraph, he continues from there as per this Berachos, this teaching, and in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Yochanan. If you got that far, then you're probably okay, is what he was saying. Now, this idea of we encounter teachings in the Talmud all the time that sound like they're the law, but they may not be the law, because elsewhere in the Talmud, there's another teaching that contradicts that one. And that's why there's an old saying when people learning Talmud that we don't paskin halacha from the Gemara. Meaning, as we read along in our Talmud study and we encounter something that looks like a law, we have to check because we're not sure that that is the law. And we have to go to a place like the Shulchan Aruch, a place where the law is set out as it was finally codified for us, because then we can be sure that some Torah scholar went into the Talmud and checked all the places that were contradictory and got the final law, which is the one that we follow. And we're going to encounter that, something just like that in one moment. Rabban Gamliel was delicate. Okay, so now we're talking about this idea that we're exempt from certain laws if we are an exceptional type of person for a particular reason. In a moment, we're going to come back to a subject we mentioned a few days ago of when are you exempt from reciting the Shema because you've got a certain situation, like you're a groom on his wedding day, right? And we read in the Gemara that a groom is exempt from reciting the Shema on his wedding night because he's preoccupied, right? He has to perform, and he's thinking about that. So because he's thinking about this mitzvah that he has to do, it's a commandment, right, to make the bride have pleasure on her wedding night, and ultimately be fruitful and multiply now that you're married. So he's nervous because he's young, right, inexperienced, and he's thinking about that mitzvah. So they taught that he's exempt from doing that. He doesn't have to say the Shema that night because he's busy with another mitzvah, right? And in fact, he was exempt the wedding night and for 3 nights afterward if he was not able to consummate the marriage on the wedding night. So they established that like it's a law. But actually, that is not the law now, right? And another example that's brought like this is that back then, one was exempt from reciting the Shema one was exempt from bathing during the Shiva, for the 7 days of the Shiva. Rabban Gamliel was delicate, and if he didn't wash himself, if he didn't bathe properly, that would actually cause him great distress. Like really, he wasn't just making that up. Not bathing for 7 days would just be too much for him, and he couldn't handle sort of like all the rest of his life and all the teaching and learning that he needed to do. And just being alive would be too much for him if he couldn't bathe. So he was exempt. There was an exception made for somebody whose constitution is that delicate. It's almost like a medical condition. And so it teaches there that you don't bathe for 7 days. And actually, the law now is not 7 days, but 30 days. Okay, now you can wash yourself. You shouldn't be dirty. You can take a cloth and clean yourself if you get dirty. But in terms of getting into a bath and immersing your whole body or taking a long hot shower, right? You actually don't do it for 30 days if you're in mourning for a parent, for example, first degree mourning, or God forbid for a child, right? And so that law would not be clear if we were just getting it out of the Talmud. We would have to consult like, is that the law? No, actually it's 30 days. And that's why we are very careful when we're studying Talmud and we encounter something that looks like a law. We have to look it up and say, is that the law now, right? Let me just check. And so now no bathing for 30 days. There are exceptions for that if not bathing for 30 days will cause you a financial hardship. You also don't cut your hair. Some people don't cut their hair, I think, for 11 months. But if looking shaggy, if being unclean for 30 days, they can't get really properly clean, is going to cause you to look too shaggy and you're going to lose business over it. So then you might have an exception, but you need to consult with a rabbi on that. So this is for people who are following the law, all the way. And likewise, saying the Shema on the wedding night, back then, exempt on the wedding night and possibly for 3 days after. Nowadays, no, you're obligated to say Shema even on your wedding night. And if you're a person who says, I'm going to be so religious about these laws, I'm not going to say Shema on my wedding night, that's considered being presumptuous. Like you're putting yourself above all the other Jews. Like you think you're going to be more religious than anybody, and that's actually incorrect. Lastly, in this page, we also encounter the case of workers and a question of, are they exempt from reciting the Shema in certain situations at work? One situation is they're pruning these thick olive trees and they're up in the tree, or they're building a wall and they're up high on the wall. So do they need to come down from the tree or from the wall? Answer, no. They can get the intentionality that they need while they're still up in the tree or on the wall. Now let's say they're not working up on the wall, they're just down on the ground. Can they be exempt from the Shema or from the grace after meals because they're working on the clock and their time is not their own? And they feel like they can't pause. If they pause to pray too much, they would be stealing time from the homeowner that they're working for. Answer, they are exempt. They are exempt because we don't want to put an undue burden on the person who's hiring them, and now it's like they're stealing from that person. But if these workers are contract workers, meaning they can determine their own schedule, they just have to finish the job at some point, get paid for the job, so then they're not exempt. They have to pray at the appointed time and in the appointed way. And if they eat, they have to say the full grace after the meal. Also, if the homeowner comes out and eats with them, so now they're eating together, they have to say the full grace after the meal. If they're idle anyway, they have to say the full Shema and they have to say the full grace after the meal. That is it. But this idea that we're very careful about our time, right? Very careful about our time. Now, there's a teaching that when we get to heaven, that we're going to be asked certain questions, right? Did we set aside regular times for Torah study? Did we reproduce? Did we produce children? The first question that we're going to be asked is, were you honest in business? Now, that doesn't only mean, did you own your own business and you were honest in dealing with other business people or with customers? It means any form of financial dealings, right? So a worker who's being paid to work and do certain things, let's say on the clock, if he wastes time, it's like stealing from the employer, so he won't be able to say, I was completely honest in my business dealings. Now, people make mistakes. They don't really do it on purpose. They don't mean to be thieves. But the sages are teaching here that we have to be so punctilious whenever we're in a financial relationship with anyone, right? Whether we're selling or buying, whether we're an employer or an employee. The employer has many responsibilities too. You're not supposed to go to sleep without having paid a day laborer his wage. Right? As soon as somebody has done work for you and you owe them money, you have to go out of your way to settle that debt as quickly as possible. And likewise, if you're an employee, right, you're on the clock, you can't waste the employer's time that he's paying you for. And we're learning that it's that important to take these responsibilities seriously, that when we get to the next world, the very first question we'll be asked is, were we honest in our business dealings? And that's especially true of all those little moments that no one's ever going to know about, right? That's why the sages made that question first. Those little moments that no one will ever know except you and God. You're going to get away with it. But if you take advantage of that, then that's not living a righteous life. That's not working in a righteous way. Think about that when we get to the next world, what that first question will be. Judith Henry in Williamsburg. Hello, Judy. It's so great to see you here. This is fantastic. Sending you big love. Judy is Nina's mom. Without Judy and the beautiful mothering that she did, we would not all have the honor and the pleasure and the joy of having Nina in our lives. So thank you, Judy, for all the amazing work you do And Judy is a very fine artist. You should check out her work, Judith Henry from Williamsburg, Brooklyn. All right, my pals, that is our show today. Let me just scroll back and see if there's any questions. And while I'm doing that, let me know if you have any other questions. Mary Garrow asks, do women study Talmud? Traditionally, not so much, though there are teachings that go all the way back to even within the Talmud. We mentioned Beruria, who was Reb Meir's wife, and she was very well versed in the Talmud and is quoted in the Talmud. And Rashi's daughters famously were very learned women as well. But mostly it was confined to men until modern times. And now there are women's study groups all over the world. I think there's an organization called Hadran out of Jerusalem where women are studying and forming study groups online and getting quite organized about it. And what's beautiful, of course, is that women bring perspectives to any field that men can't bring. I mean, that's what's beautiful about, we're all different, right? We may all have equal opportunities, and we should, but we are all very different from each other. And the more we bring from our backgrounds, the more we can add to the pot, as it were. And it's beautiful. We have so many women learning here in this group. Is there another question? Annie says, I adore Nina. Proverbs 31. She's talking about a woman of valor. And that's something we read every Friday night at our Shabbos table. A woman of valor who can find, and I always raise my hand, thank God I have a woman of valor in my life as my wife. Sending you a big kiss, honey. Nina's back in LA while I'm on the East Coast. All right, my pals, it's been great learning with you. Watch for us tomorrow. If all goes well, tomorrow's show should be coming at you from New York City. We'll be there very briefly in our college tour, our whirlwind tour. And then a few more days there, and then we should be back in LA, God willing. You'll always hear sort of, faith Jews, observant Jews, they never talk about the future as we will be here at such and such a place. We always say God willing or Bezrat Hashem, right? With the help of God. And I've pretty much gotten into that habit. I don't say what's going to happen in the future because we don't know. You never know what's going to happen in the future. And you don't like to tell God his business, like what's going to happen in the future. So when we're anticipating something that will almost certainly happen, we just add God willing or Bezrat Hashem with the help of God. All right, my pals, sending you big love from Massachusetts. Mwah.